everybody. Okay, so it is time to start our second read aloud. The first thing I'd like you to do is I would like you to get your read aloud journal, and if you would open it to your next blank page, please. Make sure there's nothing on the front or the back of it. And then we are going to do a fold so that we can separate our first book from our second book. So if you would take your page, and if you would go from the top corner, and if you would take the top corner, if you would fold it all the way into the center to the spiral, and then if you would do a fold. So we are making a big triangle, so it's going to look like this. Then if you would take the bottom triangle, the bottom corner, and you're going to fold that all the way into the center to the spiral, and you're going to crease that as well in the center, and then you're going to end up with a large triangle like this. Now I know some of your fourth grade teachers last year then had you get out your glue stick and glue it. You don't need to do that. So once you have this done, you are then going to write the name of our new book and the author. So, you ready for the new book? Drum roll, please. The title of our new book is The Call of the Bully by Scott Starkey. I know that your teachers in fourth grade read to you How to Beat the Bully Without Really Trying. And they told you in fifth grade we would share the second book in this series, The Call of the Bully. So please write The Call of the Bully by Scott Starkey on the cover on your triangle. So let me show you where I'd like you to write it. So with your pencil, or if you have a fun pen or a marker, right here on the flap here, I'd like you to write your title, The Call of the Bully. I don't want you to write it on this side. I want you to write it on this side. Then, when you come to school, you're going to get the cover, and the cover is going to get glued on here, because I always like you to have the actual cover of the book. So when I see you at school, make sure that you have a cover of the book. For now, what I'd like you to do is somewhere on the back of the flap, after you write The Call of the Bully by Scott Starkey, I want you to make some observations. What do you see happening on the cover of the book? Now remember, in the first book, How to Beat the Bully Without Really Trying, remember, that was about Rodney Rathbone. And he was the boy who came to a school in Ohio, and without even trying to, he became a hero. First thing he did was he knocked out the bully. Remember, the bully's name was Josh, and there was also Toby. Remember, there were also some other characters named Jessica. There was Rishi. There was Kayla. So think of the other characters from that book, How to Beat the Bully Without Really Trying. And every time Rodney thought about running away, because Rodney always said he really was a coward, what would happen? Something would happen and Rodney would become the hero again. So at the end of the call, or the How to Beat the Bully Without Really Trying, everything happened again where Rodney was the hero. He saved the day. He got the girl. Jessica and he were going to be boyfriend and girlfriend. And then what happened at the very end? His favorite teacher, not Mrs. Lutzkraut. And I know that your fourth grade teachers probably call her say her name differently, but I always call her Mrs. Lutzkraut. What did she do? Think about what happened to Rodney at the very end of the book. Okay, so what's going on in this? What's happening on the cover of the book? Take a really good look at the cover. What do you see? Where do you think this is taking place? Who do you think is on the cover? What do you think is going on in the background, in the foreground? Who are these people? What can you tell me about the scenery? Make some observations. Make some inferences. Make some predictions. If you need to go into the next page, make some really good critical thinking information. Write down what you are thinking. I always like you to go back and think about, as we go into the story, is any of the things that you've written down at the beginning, are they right? Were you correct with anything that you've noticed? All of these chapters are actually labeled, but if you decide that you don't like the name of the chapter, go ahead and change it. You might come up with a better chapter. So this first chapter is called Chapter 1, The Van Ride. So, Chapter 1, The Van Ride. Through the van window, I watched Mrs. Lutz-Kraut shake my dad's hand and give my mom a big hug. Then she turned to wave goodbye to me. On her face was a smile, a perfectly evil grin. I'd never seen her look so happy. My demented former teacher and I shared a secret, you see. I was about to die, and she knew it. The cause of my inevitable end, Josh, was on the van with me. And as my parents and Mrs. Lutz-Kraut disappeared in the distance, I shifted my eyes to watch him. He sat across the aisle, glaring out the window. There was one other kid in the back of the van, but he had been asleep when Josh and I climbed on. I doubted he would come to my rescue when Josh attacked. An old familiar feeling of terror began to rise from my stomach. There was no doubt in my mind that Josh was about to crush me. I mean, that had been his main goal the entire school year. Now, all that separated us was about 6 feet. I rubbed my sweaty palms on my shorts and stared out the window. Maybe Josh would wait until we got to summer camp before killing me. That meant I had about 2 hours left to enjoy life. Only there was nothing to enjoy and nothing happy to think about. I was being shipped off to some place called Camp Wyoming with my worst enemy for 8 weeks. Oh yes, Mrs. Lutz-Kraut had a lot to be smiling about this afternoon. She had tricked my parents and Josh's parents into thinking summer camp was the best thing in the world. Josh hadn't looked too pleased about it either. I shifted in the uncomfortable van seat and let my eyes wander in his direction. Big mistake. Forget about me, Rathbone. He must have been staring at me the whole time. This was it. I tried to answer, but nothing came out. Yeah, Rathbone, you ain't that tough. I could see you were real scared at graduation. I was a fool all year, thinking you were tough. This time, nothing's saving you. Punching you's gonna be like Christmas morning. Guess that makes me Santa. I didn't understand his logic, but I understood what it meant when his legs shifted into the aisle. I raised my arms in a feeble attempt to block the incoming buffalo stampede. Vroom! The engine revved, and I could feel tires skidding on sand. The van swerved, knocking Josh off balance. I watched as Santa banged his head on the floor. You there! The driver hollered. Me? I squeaked. Yeah, you. I could see the driver's grizzled face and dark eyes in the big rear-view mirror. Help that kid up! Josh was rolling around in the aisle, dazed and holding his head. Go on, put him in a seat. I looked closer at the driver. He wore a ripped tank top and it had a big bushy beard. Do I have to? I asked. Do it, the driver ordered. I reached down to grab Josh under the arms, just as the driver turned his attention back to the road. The van swerved violently, knocking me off balance. I landed with a crunch right on top of Josh. No more, no more, he whimpered. I'll behave, Rodney, I promise. Just leave me alone. I backed away and watched him climb into his seat where he curled up into a ball. My jaw hung low, shocked. There was no tougher kid than Josh. He was like twice my size. Thanks to the van driver's horrible driving, Josh had been knocked down before he could ever throw a punch. Maybe my amazing run of luck from the school year wasn't over. Not just yet, anyway. Chapter 2: My New Beast Friend. And that's beast, not best. Beast. Josh had been quiet for about an hour as we drove along, probably wondering how I always got the best of him. You look pretty runty, he finally muttered. I don't get it. How come you fight good? Well, I corrected him. My mom's constant grammar reminders were rubbing off on me. Huh? How come you fight well? Oh, I guess 'cause I'm tough. I rolled my eyes. He continued, but how come you fight good too, Rathbone? He was still holding the side of his head. I relaxed a little, and my big mouth kicked into gear. For starters, I have natural killer instincts. Combine that with years of high-intensity combat training, not to mention, he was looking at me intently now, but I am not sure how much was actually reaching his brain. Finally, he just smiled and said, Yeah, fighting's good. It was the first time I'd ever seen him smile, not counting when he inflicted pain on some poor kid. He turned and looked out the window for a moment. You know, he continued, I beat up over 100 kids and never lost one fight. Then you beat me up 2 times, plus today. That makes... The higher math was too much for him. 3, I informed him. Yeah, whatever. It's just, I still can't believe it. He sounded both disappointed and respectful. Before you came along, I did whatever I wanted, took whatever I wanted, beat up whoever I wanted, did whatever I wanted. I couldn't believe we were having a conversation. A weird, creepy conversation, but a conversation. Usually he just grunted or told me he was going to knock my face off. I never wanted to ruin your year, I explained, but you're the one who picked a fight. You play with fire, you get burned. You like fire too? Boy, this kid was thick. Yeah, fire's pretty cool, I agreed. I was willing to play along if it meant keeping his hands off my neck. I love fire. I got a lighter. You want to help me light the seat on fire? I think we should probably leave the seats alone. You see, I explained, we're traveling in the van that you want to set fire to. He seemed to contemplate that for a minute. Anyway, Rathbone, you're actually not that bad. Hey, check this out. With a dumb grin etched on his lips, he began punching the back of the seat in front of him. I, on the other hand, wrestled with the vision of bunk beds burning in my cabin. I gazed out the window and watched the Ohio countryside pass by, each mile taking me farther from home. I was miserable. Sure, I had dodged a bullet with Josh, but you have to understand the incredible school year that was still fresh in my mind. When it started, I was the new kid in town, afraid of getting pounded to a pulp at school. Then through pure luck, I became Mr. Popular, hero of the town, czar of the playground. I met Rishi, Slim, and Dave, the 3 best friends I'd ever had. No group could make me laugh so hard. Rishi was the big talker and had outlined a million awesome things for us to do this summer. None of it would be happening now, with me at least. As the van zoomed down the highway, I thought about something else that was making me miserable. I had left behind my girlfriend, Jessica. We had been officially going out for about 20 minutes when my parents dropped the camp bomb. "Hey, Rodney," Josh called out suddenly from his seat. Whatever he was about to say, no matter how dumb, I actually welcomed the distraction. Anything to get my mind off Jessica. "Yeah?" I asked. "You going out with Jessica?" Evidently, I was traveling with the amazing moron mind reader. "I don't want to talk about it," I answered. Okay. So you going out with her?" His words hurt more than his fists ever could. I didn't know if being apart from her was going to end our relationship. I sighed. "Listen, she's not happy with me going away and all." "No? Don't feel bad, though." "Why not?" I asked. "Because she's real pretty. She'll find a new boyfriend in no time." I stared at the gorilla sitting next to me. "How's that supposed to make me feel better?" "Huh? Oh, I guess I got that backward. Yeah, you should feel bad. Hey, driver, I gotta take a whiz." I watched the driver's face in the rearview mirror. He was chewing on a toothpick. "We'll be at camp soon." He introduced himself as, was it Grizzly Bob? Creepy Bill? Smelly Stan? No, it was Survival Steve. He had a bushy beard and a deep voice, and his eyes were dark and menacing. Worst of all, he wore a big hunting knife on his leather belt. Josh didn't seem to care or notice. "I gotta go so bad I could fill a pool." Survival Steve's eyebrows rose for a moment. "We'll take a shortcut down the old logger road. You can go on the side somewhere. It'll save time and it's good scenery." He banked down the next exit ramp off the highway, turned left, and eventually made a right on a dirt road. I'm not sure you could actually call it a road. After a while, the trees and branches closed in and began whacking the sides of the van. Josh's face was scrunched up, and he was holding himself. I moved farther away, not wanting to get sprayed by a yellow geyser. "Pull over!" he yelled. Survival Steve said, "Hold your water! That looks like a good spot up ahead." He brought the van to a stop. "Yes, you can go." Josh didn't wait. He bolted out the door and off into the woods. "All right, how about you two?" I needed to go, though probably not as badly as Josh. I could hear him moaning off in the woods. As I angled toward the door, I noticed that the kid in the back was awake now. He shook his head, and his eyes looked frightened under the brim of his red baseball cap. I couldn't blame him for being nervous, considering we were stopped in the middle of nowhere. After glancing around, he curled up and pulled his hat down further. I climbed out and walked a few paces away from the van into the woods. The dark pine forest smelled thick and sweet, and the air hung heavy. It was real quiet and eerie. I noticed that the sun was already setting behind the tallest trees. As I finished my business, I shivered and realized I couldn't wait to get back in the van. "Beautiful, ain't it?" It was Survival Steve. "I guess," I answered. "Yup, these woods are something special. I once lived in them by myself for 3 years. Killed a moose with only a rock, like this one. Moose liver, now that's tasty stuff." I looked back at him. The word insane flashed through my mind. "What's your name?" he asked. "Rodney." "Rodney, check this out." He picked up the rock and flung it right at a tree. A huge section of bark shattered from the trunk. "Aim still perfect." He grinned. "Nothing beats a good stone." I was too scared to comment. "Rodney, you come by my shack at camp. I'll teach you to throw a stone like that. Better yet, I'll show you how to use a bow and arrow." Avoid all shacks this summer, I thought as we returned to the van. "You!" Steve hollered at Josh, who was back from the woods. "Go get that other kid and see if he wants a soda." Josh made an evil grin, and I knew what was coming as he climbed inside the van. The next sound I heard would be thwack. "Ow!" screamed the unsuspecting kid. "Why'd you hit me?" "Driver said to," Josh declared. "Huh? Whack! No! The poor kid tumbled out of the van. Where the heck are we? He asked, moving away from Josh, who had jumped down behind him. Survival Steve stepped forward, rock in hand. The kid's lips started quivering as he backed away, a look of panic building on his face. Guess I'll open this sucker up with old Reliable, Survivor Steve announced, the rock raised, ready to strike. Whoa! The kid was off like a shot, tearing into the woods. I was only talking about opening the can of soda, Steve laughed. The opener thing broke. Now I gotta go get that scaredy cat. You two wait here. I suddenly found myself alone with Josh in the middle of nowhere. Thank God we had bonded on the van. But because, instead of threatening me like he'd done in the past, he told me a story about a time he had punched his friend Toby in the face at school. We were both laughing when Survival Steve came trudging back from the woods. All right, we got problems. That kid ran off. Far. We're all going to have to go find him. We better spread out because we don't want to be out here in the dark. All too familiar feelings began to creep along my spine. I looked nervously into the woods. The trees were thick, blocking out most of the light. We're going in there, I croaked. Yep. You big fella, head off to my right. And you, he said, eyeing me, you walk in on my left. Use the sun to navigate. Sun to navigate? I grew up in Queens, in New York City. The only navigating I could do was hailing a cab. Let's go, he barked. I walked so close to him that if I'd gotten any closer, he'd be giving me a piggyback ride. What the? Spread out. Go to the left. We can't find him all bunched up, and we don't want to be out here when it gets dark. It took great courage on my part to move into the woods on my own. In less than 5 minutes, the courage ran out. Steve was nowhere in sight. Well, I'll just head back to the van, I told myself. I turned around and started walking, but with each step, my heart beat a little faster. Nothing looked familiar. Sweat poured down into my eyes. As I caught my breath, my brain whispered 2 little words that didn't exactly calm me. You're lost. Help! I screamed. Josh! Crazy driver! Maybe that was a mistake. Anybody? Help! I heard my echo, then silence. I tried again a few more times before my voice began to give out. I sat down on a big rock. Somebody will find you, I lied to myself. I thought about my parents and my little sister back in Garrettsville. I thought about my friends and wondered what they were up to. Then my thoughts turned to Jessica. Only yesterday I had told her about going away to camp. Rodney, why didn't you tell me sooner? She had asked. I didn't know, I explained. My dopey dad surprised me after the graduation ceremony. Well, what about us? What about the lake and the pool and... I know. I can't get out of it. I tried. I won't be gone forever. How long? 8 weeks. 8 weeks? That is forever. It's longer. It's the whole summer. I tried to calm her. We'll be going to middle school together in the fall. I'll write you. I guess you can always call while you're away or text. Actually, we're not allowed to have cell phones. The words had hung there as she realized we weren't even going to speak. She looked really upset, making my heart sink low into my stomach. It felt the same now, sitting on this rock in the woods. Sitting on this rock in the woods? I had lost total track of time. It was almost dark now. Think. What would Survival Steve do? Besides killing a moose, he'd probably get something to protect himself. Yes, that's it. I looked around and found a big stick. I felt better clutching it and headed off in what I hoped was the direction of the van. Just when it was getting so dark I could barely see, I noticed something red up ahead, the baseball cap of the kid who had run off. Hey! I yelled. Found you! He turned around, saw me, and tore off. Wait! I shouted, running after him. There was no way I was going to let this kid leave me alone in the woods. Stop! I shouted. The kid looked back, screamed, and kept going. Why was he running away? Stop running! Get back here! I yelled, my own fear building up again. After about 5 minutes of running through thick underbrush and sharp branches, my legs were scratched all over. I noticed a bright glow up ahead. The kid was running toward it. I followed, gaining on him. We were going to be saved! He bolted through a bush, and I dove through too, landing right in the middle of a large crowd of kids, some wearing Camp Wyoming t-shirts. The light was from a roaring campfire. I was about to yell, "Thank God I'm saved!" But old Baseball Cap beat me to it. "Oh, thank God!" he screamed, his voice higher than I expected. "That madman was chasing me through the woods!" He pointed at me. "They tried to kill me back at the van!" The kid was gasping for air and looked on the verge of collapse. My brain reeled with every emotion as I realized I had just gone from saved to public enemy number 1. I glanced around at the crowd. No one knew what to make of me as I stood there in my ripped, sweaty, dirty clothes. Their looks ranged from fearful to suspicious to menacing. I glanced at my hand, holding the stick that suddenly resembled a club. "Yikes!" I gulped, dropping it with a quick jerk. This was bad. "Wait," I stammered. "It's not what you think." My mouth, however, couldn't complete the sentence, for at that moment, the kid flung off his baseball cap. Long brown hair tumbled down past his shoulders. I mean, her shoulders. It was a girl standing there, with emerald green eyes that flashed in the firelight. Even in the middle of that insane moment, I could see she was cute. Real cute. If I didn't get burned at the stake, summer camp had just gotten a lot more interesting. And that's the end of chapter 2. Okay, in your reading journal, I want you to write a prediction. What do you think is going to happen to Rodney? And who do you think this girl is?